Okay, hello. Today's main subject is going to be black locust or yellow locust. We had some tree work done a while back and we got a lot of black locusts. And I said I wanted the wood because it's really good firewood. And so I've got some here. It's in various stages of growth. Some is hollow, some is rotten, some is solid and old, some is fresh and green. Locust is kind of that kind of a tree. So I thought I'd talk about it while I split it some. And then I've also got some Bradford pear, which is a invasive tree from Asia that people landscape with. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. It's mainly about black locust, which is one of my favorites. So here we go. I think it is a easy wood to split, and I don't split it down very far. If it'll fit in the wood stove and I can pick it up with one hand, that's all that's going to get. And that piece right there is ready to burn. This came off of a tree, but you can see there's no bark on this side. There's a little bit over here. And if we look at the end of it, all this right here is what's left of the living tree, the sapwood and all that stuff, the inner bark. What happens is locust has a natural controller insect called the locust borer, named for the tree that it eats. And it lays its little eggs on the tree, and the larvae go in, and when they hatch out, after they've gestated and all that gross stuff, they leave these 1/4-inch holes, and I'll show you some. I think I got some out here somewhere in the living tissue of the tree. And it doesn't kill, it's not like the emerald ash borer that kills an ash tree all the way. It just kills part of it. So it'll grow up here and die, and then it'll grow up over here and die, and it'll grow up over here. So you don't get a lot of really straight, pretty, like you think of like a straight oak tree or something like that. But I really like them because I do like the kind of whimsical nature of them. They do have a beautiful compound leaf that I find very, very attractive for a tree leaf. And they have big clusters of flowers that bees use to pollinate. There's one of those holes. So it's just that one hole. They eat around, they bore in, and they pop out with this one big hole. So it doesn't kill everything, just that spot. But the trees are very fast growing. They're also one of those trees that if you cut it down where its roots were, it'll throw up a bunch of suckers. And I mean thousands from one root stem. That we've got some in our field that are 20 feet tall that were from a tree that was there before we bought the property. Like years before the stump is gone. There's just a hole where the stump was, but these trees are growing up out of the roots. And so it's a very, very recolonizing tree, I guess you could call it. Like it will take over an area that has been disturbed, especially if there was one there before. So yeah, I think it's a really neat tree. It does grow super fast, which is another reason why I like it. These are pretty big and pretty solid. The other thing that's kind of weird about them is they have this really, really, really hard wood that has to die or become like heartwood, I guess is the way to say it. So this is one that was young. Let's see if we can see that. I don't know. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 years of growth right there. And you can, if you can, let's try to come here and see. That's just very vibrant and live looking. That is much softer, even though this is heartwood, than the other stuff that's been out in the field for a long time. So the same size on an older tree is going to be harder. I'll show you an example. If I've got it. Yeah. So this is about the same size at the top of the tree, and this was part of the living tree, not the stuff that had died. You can see by the really light colored sapwood and inner bark and stuff. But this is darker, and that darker color kind of represents that harder, just more cured out wood, and that's a living part. So if we go to a dead part, this is very, nerding out on this locust tree, but it's kind of neat the transitions it goes through. So here is a no sapwood, no bark piece. You can see it's kind of it's almost one color. It's got the stripes in there where the rings are, but it's all just kind of that chestnut brown color, maybe. So there's all three. Old and dead, same tree, alive, new young tree. All about the same size. Look at the growth ring differences. This one's had lots of years on it. So has this one, but not quite as many as that. And this one's only got 10. I remember when this guy was a little bitty, I said, let's let that grow. Now it's growing over our clothesline, so we cut it down. And there's more back there. Anyway, each one of these behaves differently. This one's too wet and green to throw on the wood stove. This one you could throw on a really hot fire and it'll burn good after a while. And then this one is ready for the stove, even though it's less than 2 months on the ground. Yeah. Now, the other thing that happens with this wood is carpenter ants get in it. And it's got some kind of antifungal property that it makes it not rot when it's on the ground. You see, it splits really easy. And this is not the straightest grain. Some of this is, but there's a waviness to it. There's a spot there. When it rots up in the tree, which it's prone to do, more so than on the ground, you get these fuzzy voids of heart rot. And that's not worth a damn for firewood. That's cool. It's even got ice in it. But it won't hurt anything. Just one split to open it up. The outer part, there's still enough BTUs in the edges of this that's where a worthy piece of firewood. Now, the thing about the locust firewood too, around here where I'm from, this was the old timers' favorite. They could get their hands on locust firewood, they would. We cleaned out my granddad's basement. He had about 2 ricks that had been there since the 70s. That stuff burned like the sun, man. It was hot. It's really dense. It's perfect stove wood. And like I said, I only split it so I can handle it with one hand. If you put a piece, and I've just got a regular wood stove in my basement. I don't have a wood burning furnace, but you put a piece like that in there, it probably wouldn't burn. It's so hard. The outside would burn off, but it's just so hard and dense, it just might not burn. Even if you had a really, really good hot bed of coals, you'd have to throw other wood on top of it. And it wouldn't contribute that much for hours. So it's it'd be kind of a liability. I've had locust fires go out because I didn't have enough heat under them. That being said, if it's cold, really good and cold, there's nothing better than a piece of locust in the wood stove. And once it gets going, put your piece of oak or hickory. Those are the two. Everybody loves oak and hickory, but they're secondary to this black locust. I put a piece in the other day that was about that big around, and it caught on fire. It was burning pretty good, but I kept putting every 30-45 minutes I put a piece of oak or hickory in, and it was still there. It was starting to coal, then it was coaled up good, but every time I put a piece of wood on there, it was still solid. And then finally it broke down. So it just kept going and going and burning when that other wood went on. But if you put one in too big, it might put it out. So that's why I'm splitting some of these down a little bit. If I had an outdoor furnace, I probably wouldn't do that. The other cool thing about this wood is when it does die up in the tree like this stuff did, I mean, that's seasoned. In an emergency, I could use every bit of this. Another thing that happens to this tree is the carpenter ant will devour the core. And that's the part I don't understand, because this is hardwood. I mean, really hard. Sometimes it doesn't split good, but that's because all this weirdness down here. But I don't get how a bunch of ants could get in there and chew on it. I guess they let a little bit of that heart rot that I had it earlier. I guess they let that start to get going, and then they go to work on it. My dad always liked that locust that had the heart out of it because it split the best, and it does. Locust is also one of those trees that it'll take over a spot and then leave it. But like, so say it grows on a hillside and then oak and hickory and those things come in and shade out the locust. Well, the locust will then die and all their trunks will be laying on the forest floor, and they'll just sit there and they won't rot. I don't mean like for a year, I mean like for 40 years. Critters live in them and under them, but you can go in there with your chainsaw, cut them up, and you got seasoned firewood. Now, I'll never put a new chain to a piece of locust unless it's really green, because one locust tree that's that big around, that will dull a new chain all the way down to where it needs a new profile. That may be the only true negative. It makes really pretty firewood. Actually, it's really pretty wood to work green too. If you find a good juicy live piece, that one little one I cut would be a good one if I can get my act together and make a spoon out of it. It is really pretty wood. Now this other stuff that's dead, crunchy, no thank you. I'll show you this big piece right here. See if I can get it on place. Well, before I get to that, hold on, let's check this one out. This is one of those that's all hollow all the way through, and it's kind of crooked because this is the last piece I cut, and by the time I was done cutting some of this other stuff, that chain that I was using, which was well worn, started cutting diagonally, and it tells me it was done. Oh, little varmint hole. Like I said, it makes good habitat. This tree that this came out of was big and tall. And it had one branch that was alive for like 6 years. A little bitty branch way at the top. Everything else was dead. And it finally died last year. And so we took advantage. All right, I'll pop this one, then we'll do this big guy, and then we'll talk about some Bradford pear. I don't really sell the Locust. I'll sell every other kind of wood that I cut. Well, take that back. I won't sell beech because I like it, and I don't sell Locust because I like it. It's just hard to get your hands on it. Okay, let's cut this big one up. Split this big one up. Good for the back. It's also got this bark that comes off that's pretty good kindling. Now, if you do get a big piece like this is, you know, where they had their notch in it, so it's gonna cut this funky part. I could cut that off, and that would be a campfire tree stump for a millennia. You know, set it by your bench or your folding chair or whatever, and out by the bonfire. Don't have to treat it. Bugs won't mess with it. You might get some termites in the bottom of it, but it'll take them 700 or 800 years to chew through it. But this one's got that notch in it and a hole in the bottom. I got some nicer ones over there that I'm going to use. So this one we're going to split into firewood. Normally, well, I guess typically normally on every other wood, I would for the most part knock these down again. That one I probably will. Tall. But these other ones, I will leave. 2 reasons why. 1, that's a pretty big piece, good piece for the stove. But 2, pieces like that are really good for end cap stacking. So when I get a big piece of round wood like this out of a tree, I always typically split it into the pie wedge shapes. At least a couple of these rounds, so I've got good end cap wood. And that's with any species, especially the harder ones, locust, hickory, white oak. Maybe a little bit like that. I'll say this about pieces that are smaller on this stuff, this wood. It does make good kindling. Well, not kindling, but those pieces right there on a bed of kindling really rock the big stuff. Okay. One more piece of locust. Let's talk about Bradford pear, least favorite tree. Well, almost. There's one more that's even worse, but let's talk about the Bradford pear a little bit here. These were growing down the driveway. Neighbors have a couple in their yard, and a few years of neglect to let them sprout up everywhere else. And so when the tree guys came out, I said, let's get every Bradford pear in the driveway, and they did a great job of it. But this stuff is, according to some sources on the internet, it burns really hot. And maybe it does. I feel like it's much more along the lines of cherry wood. It splits like cherry, kind of like a cherry maple. To me, it kind of burns and culls like cherry, seasons like cherry. I definitely wouldn't drive very far for it. But I had it, and it's one of those guilt-free firewood sources. This piece of box elder, it's another one of those crummy trees, but it's native. Okay. Yeah, this stuff it has a really dense shade foliage. That's kind of nice, but they break out in the wind. They grow fast. They don't grow into big lumber type trees. It's basically just a giant bush or a small tree. You know, I'm kind of partial to the native trees, so I don't really like that one. But I don't mind burning it. All right, black locust, little Bradford paired topper. Stay warm.